It all started with a whisper. Not from a boardroom, not from a surveillance drone, but from a 9-year-old girl with 2 big sneakers and a quiet stare that saw everything. "You have a camera in your office," she said softly, "but it's not yours." Graham Ashford froze. The billionaire tech mogul founder of Halcyon Systems, a man used to controlling the world with just a swipe of his thumb, sat utterly still, his fingers hovering mid-keystroke. Sunlight poured through the high windows of his study, casting golden stripes across the mahogany desk. But in that moment, all warmth drained from the room. He turned slowly. Zoe stood in the doorway, clutching the edge of the desk like it was her last anchor. "Come here," he said gently. She stepped forward, her steps nearly silent on the thick rug. Zoe was not like other kids her age, not since the accident. Her parents, Graham's brother and sister-in-law, had died in a highway crash 6 months ago. Since then, she'd barely spoken above a whisper. She didn't cry. She didn't act out. She just watched, like a silent sentinel. Now she stood in front of him, eyes wide, voice low. "It's hidden. Behind the painting. The one Miss Camilla brought." Graham blinked. Camilla Vaughn, his fiancée, had given him that painting a month ago. A soft-toned skyline. Said it would warm up the room. She'd even helped him hang it. "I saw it blink at night," Zoe added. "So I scanned it. With my tablet." "You scanned it," Graham repeated. She nodded, serious. "It's sending out a signal. It's not from your network." He stared at her. She was 9. She wasn't supposed to know what a network was, let alone how to trace one. But Zoe had always been different. He rose from his chair and crossed to the painting, lifting it carefully from the wall. It came off easily, and for a moment, he saw nothing unusual, just drywall. Then just above the molding, there it was. A tiny black dot, no bigger than a pencil eraser. A camera. Graham's heart tightened. He said nothing for a moment, then turned to her. "Zoe, how long have you known?" "A week." "I wasn't sure if you'd believe me." His jaw clenched. Camilla had given him that painting 4 weeks ago. She'd kissed him under it. Said it was to celebrate the new defense contract. To mark the beginning of something big. They'd toasted with wine. She'd sat on this very desk. He remembered the exact way she smiled. And all that time, a camera had been blinking quietly behind them. Watching. Recording. "Zoe," he said quietly, "can you sit for a moment?" She nodded and climbed into the leather chair across from him. Her legs barely reached the edge. "There's more," she said, folding her hands. "I found others." He swallowed. "Where in the living room?" "Your bedroom. The guest room." Her voice cracked just a little. "I think someone's listening to everything." The air grew cold. He took a deep breath, let it out slow. Zoe wasn't just smart. She was brave. Brave enough to speak up. Brave enough to come to him. And he'd nearly missed it. "You've been carrying this alone?" he asked. She nodded, her shoulders tight. "I believe you," he said. She blinked. Her lip trembled. "You do. I should have believed you the first moment you said it." And for the first time in months, her shoulders relaxed. Just a little. He returned to the painting and inspected the frame. The camera was embedded so neatly it could have been part of the design. Elegant. Minimal. Purposeful. This wasn't a prank. It was betrayal. "And if Camilla planted one, how many more were there, Zoe?" he said, kneeling in front of her. "I need your help. But only if you feel safe. Can you keep watching quietly?" She looked him in the eyes, and for the first time since she'd moved in, she smiled. Not a polite smile, a real one. The kind that says, finally someone's listening. He placed a hand gently on her shoulder. From now on, he said, we do this together. She nodded, and just like that, a quiet alliance was born. By the time Camilla returned home that night, everything had changed. The next morning, Graham sat in his study long before the sun came up. He hadn't slept. The painting now lay face down in the corner of the room, the tiny lens staring up at the ceiling like a dead eye. Zoe was still asleep upstairs, curled in blankets, unaware that Graham had spent the entire night turning over every interaction, every little coincidence from the past month in his mind. Camilla always arrived at the perfect moment. With coffee, with questions, with compliments. She had a gift for making things feel casual, too casual, now that he looked back. And the way she'd taken sudden interest in helping around the house, offering to tidy his office, or reorganize guest spaces, suddenly felt like something more. Something rehearsed. At 6:15 a.m., the housekeeper arrived. Josephine. She had worked for the Ashford family for 20 years longer than some of his staff had been alive. She was sharp, loyal, and had always treated Zoe like her own granddaughter. When Graham opened the door and she saw his face, she didn't even set her bag down before saying, "What happened?" He motioned her in and closed the door behind them. "We have a problem." In the study, Graham explained what Zoe had found. Josephine listened without blinking, her arms folded tightly, her eyes narrowing with every word. Where, she asked? Office, bedroom, guest suite, possibly more. Josephine nodded grimly. I knew something was off. That woman, always hovering, always knows where you are, what time you're back, what you've eaten. She paused, and she's been talking to Preston, more than usual. Graham's heart skipped. Preston Hale. My gut says something's wrong, Josephine said. He came by twice last week, said he was checking paperwork. Camilla acted like it was nothing. But I heard them whispering in the den. Graham stared at her. Preston Hale wasn't just any colleague. He was Graham's best friend. They'd gone to MIT together. Built Halcyon from nothing, shoulder to shoulder. If Preston was involved... He took a step back, jaw tight. Thank you, Josephine. What do you want me to do? Act normal, Graham said. Camilla can't know we're onto her. Not yet. Josephine gave a dry smile. Son, I've been acting polite longer than she's been alive. I'll be fine. Just then, Zoe padded in barefoot, oversized sweatshirt, tablet in hand. She didn't say good morning. She walked straight to the desk and opened her screen. I mapped the signal from the cameras, she said. They're not going to a cloud. Graham raised a brow. Where then? Somewhere in the city. A small building downtown. No name on the mailbox, just numbers. But the signal's route there. Graham leaned in. The map on her tablet pulsed red over a location in Midtown. You're sure they're not recording constantly? Zoe explained. Only short bursts. Probably so it doesn't get flagged. He exhaled slowly. This isn't amateur work. Zoe looked up at him. You think Camilla's working with someone. I think she's not alone. And I think it's time we call in help. Graham stepped over to a cabinet in the wall and pressed his thumb to the sensor. A hidden compartment slid open. Inside, a plain black phone, unregistered, reserved for emergencies. He tapped a number he hadn't used in years. The voice that answered was calm, gruff, former military. This is Stroud. It's Ashford, Graham said. I need eyes on my house. Discreet. No uniforms, no chatter. There was a pause. Timeline tonight. I'll be there in 3 hours. By late afternoon, Victor Stroud and 2 of his best men had converted the guest house into a mobile command center. Cables coiled across the floor, leading into surveillance monitors and radio equipment. Outside, the main estate looked untouched. Inside it was a nest of wires and quiet tension. Stroud, broad-shouldered and sharp-eyed, sat beside Graham reviewing Zoe's findings. "This little girl traced that network herself?" he asked. "She did." Stroud glanced over his shoulder. Zoe was in the corner chair drawing something in her notebook while sipping cocoa. Innocent on the outside, watchdog on the inside. "Smart kid," he muttered. "She sees patterns. She saved me," Graham said quietly. "I didn't even know I was being watched." That night, Camilla returned home, right on time. 6:12 p.m., exactly like always. She stepped through the door, humming, wearing Graham's navy robe, and a silk scarf knotted at her neck. Her smile bloomed like always, perfectly warm, perfectly placed. "There you are," she said, peeking into the study. "You look exhausted." Graham forced a smile. "Didn't sleep well. You want dinner? I picked up that salmon you like." He nodded. "In a bit. I've just got a system update running." Camilla's eyes flicked briefly to the desk, where Graham had intentionally left his laptop open. On screen, a file labeled Neural Mesh, Confidential. She didn't ask, but she looked. Then she leaned in, kissed his cheek, and walked away, exactly as he expected. Graham waited until she was upstairs before stepping out onto the porch. Stroud met him there. "She's transmitting," he confirmed. "We caught the burst. Went straight to the same location Zoe found." Graham nodded. She took the bait. But what they didn't expect, what shook Graham to the core, came next. Preston showed up, unannounced, through the back door. Zoe, stationed with her tablet in the hallway, caught everything on video. Preston wasn't there to talk. He was there to collect. And Camilla handed him a flash drive without hesitation. They spoke in low voices, urgent, clipped. Then they embraced, not like friends, like partners, like people who had done this before. Graham waited until they were seated on the couch before stepping into the room. Camilla jumped. Preston froze. "Well," Graham said, "this is cozy." Neither of them spoke. Preston stood up quickly. "I just stopping by. You're supposed to be in D.C. tomorrow." Preston blinked. Who told you that Graham didn't answer? He just turned to the bar, poured himself a drink, and faced them again. "To old friends," he said, "and new truths." Stroud entered behind him, flanked by two men in plain clothes. Camilla stood quickly. "What is this? Just a conversation?" Graham said, calm, a very overdue one. He lifted a remote and turned on the monitor. There on screen played the footage, the handoff, the whisper, the betrayal. Camilla's face went pale. Preston didn't move. "You bugged me," she hissed. "No," Graham said. "You bugged me. I just learned how to listen." Stroud stepped forward, holding out two pairs of cuffs. Camilla's voice cracked. It was just supposed to be a job. "I didn't mean to fall in love," Graham asked coldly. She blinked. "I guess I did," she whispered. Graham didn't flinch. "You walked into my house," he said. "Slept in my bed. Lied to a child. And you did it for money." Preston said nothing. There was nothing left to say. As they were led out of the house, Zoe emerged from the hallway. She stood beside Graham, quiet. He looked down at her. "You okay?" She nodded. "Are you?" He pulled her close. "I am now." The house was quiet again, but not peaceful. It was the kind of quiet that comes after something violent, the kind of silence that hums in your ears and makes you question if it's truly over or just beginning. Graham stood in his office staring at the fireplace, where Camilla had once hung her favorite photo of them together. He had taken it down that morning. Now only a faint mark remained on the wall. Zoe was sitting on the couch, her knees drawn to her chest blanket wrapped around her like armor. Her tablet rested in her lap screen, still glowing with signal logs and camera pings. Neither of them had eaten dinner. Down the hallway, the door to the guest house closed softly. Stroud and his team were resetting the surveillance feed, combing through all the data they had pulled from Camilla and Preston's devices. It was enough to shut down 2 lifetimes, but somehow it didn't feel like a win. Zoe looked up. "Do you think there's more Graham didn't answer right away?" He just sat beside her. "Yes." She didn't look surprised. Stroud returned 5 minutes later. No smile. No clipboard. Just a quiet weight in his eyes. "You need to see this." They moved into the study where a small screen on Stroud's portable console showed a folder labeled Outbound Transfer Logs. Priority Alpha. "These aren't going to Camilla," he said. "They're not even going to the same location we tracked earlier." He tapped into a screen. A map appeared, this one with red pulses spreading far wider than expected. Multiple locations, Stroud continued. Offshore servers, proxy routes, military-grade obfuscation. Whoever set this up wanted you to think Camilla was the point. "She's not," Graham asked. "She's a pawn," Stroud replied. "At best, middle tier. The real architect used her to get inside your house. But the intelligence, your R&D, your neural code, your predictive learning framework was being funneled somewhere else." He tapped again. A single word flashed across the screen. A code name. Monarch. Zoe leaned forward, brow furrowed. "What's that?" Graham stared at the screen, the name ringing like an alarm. "It's a name I've only heard once," he said. "Years ago. In a security briefing with the Department of Defense. Whispered in a list of threats no one wanted to write down." Stroud nodded grimly. "Monarch isn't a person. It's a shell, a network. No face, no known country. But one mission: take control of emerging tech before the world even knows it matters." "Why Halcyon?" Zoe asked. "Because we were ahead," Graham replied. "Because we believed in transparency. Because we refused to sell our core algorithms to defense contractors. That made us dangerous." Stroud pulled up another screen. "Camilla's phone tried to ping Monarch this morning. We traced the signal to a building registered under Bexler Capital." "An investment firm?" Graham asked. Stroud nodded. "But they're not in the business of investing anymore. They're a front. Monarch's data laundromat." Graham's hands clenched into fists. "They weren't just stealing my work. They were preparing to replace me." That night, while the rest of the estate slept, Graham stood in his garage, phone to his ear. He was calling someone he hadn't spoken to in 5 years. "Leon," he said when the line picked up. A deep, slow voice answered. "Didn't think I'd ever hear from you again. I need someone who knows how to follow ghosts." There was a pause. Then, "Where and when?" "Atlanta. Tomorrow." The next morning, Leon Barksdale walked through the Ashford estate gates like a man returning to the battlefield. Built like a bulldozer in a leather coat, he carried a military aura that hadn't faded with time. His face was weathered. His eyes were sharp. And his smile was non-existent. "You look worse than last time," he told Graham. "I've had a month." They sat in the study with Zoe present. She had her notebook in one hand and a juice box in the other, still listening like a junior analyst in a war room. Leon listened to everything. The cameras. The betrayal. The trace. The word Monarch. When it was done, he asked one question. "Have they touched Halcyon's vault?" Graham's stomach turned. "No. It's air-gapped. Triple locked. Only Reed and I have access." Leon stood. "Then they're going to try." Zoe looked up. "What's the vault?" Graham answered slowly. It's where we keep the halcyon core. Not the code, not the product, the soul. The thing that makes everything else work. Zoe's voice dropped to a whisper. So if they get it, they can build a fake version of us and claim we copied them. Leon nodded. It's already started. The blueprint we baited Camilla with it was downloaded and repackaged under a fake startup registered in Brooklyn, called Glasstech Labs. Stroud frowned. Never heard of it. They don't want you to, Leon said. They don't need public attention. They just need to beat you to market or discredit you before the IPO. Graham stood. Then we go to them. That afternoon, Graham, Leon, and Zoe boarded a private jet bound for New York. Stroud stayed behind to hold the perimeter. Zoe sat beside Graham, headphones on, sketching something quietly in her lap. When he peeked, he saw she was drawing butterflies, not delicate ones with teeth. In Manhattan, they checked into a boutique hotel in Soho. No staff asked questions. No media followed. At sunrise, they moved quietly into the industrial edge of the East River warehouse blocks that had once been storage, now home to hidden networks and soft-spoken billionaires. They found Glasstech Labs between a furniture importer and a blank facade with no sign. The entrance was keycard only. Leon had already made one. Inside it looked wrong. Rows of black servers, white fluorescent lights, quiet hums, and a wall of projections showing halcyon interfaces, ones that hadn't been released yet. This isn't a lab, Leon said. It's a copy. Graham stared at one monitor. It showed the halcyon logo altered slightly. Just enough to deny it in court. Just enough to fool someone who didn't know better. Then a voice behind them said, "You're not supposed to be here." A man stepped forward. Gray hair, calm voice, custom suit. "I'm Eric Vaughn," he said. "I run this branch." Graham turned slowly. "You run a theft factory." Eric smiled. "We run innovation. You just didn't move fast enough." Leon stepped forward, dropped a folder on the nearest table. 2 terabytes of trace logs. Confessions. Signed statements. Eric's smile didn't move. "And what do you want, an apology?" "No," Graham said. "I want you to disappear." Eric's jaw ticked. "We'll see." By the time they walked out of the building, federal agents were pulling up in unmarked SUVs. Eric Vaughn was in cuffs before he made it to the stairwell. Across the street, Zoe stood beside a pretzel stand watching everything unfold. Graham crossed to her, slow and quiet. She didn't look up from her snack. Was that one of the bad guys? Yes. "Good," she said. "Let's go home now." Graham paused. Home. It didn't mean the house anymore. It meant wherever she was. And after everything, that was enough. The air in Halcyon headquarters felt heavier than usual. Not with fear, but with pressure. A pressure that comes when you know the worst might not be behind you, but ahead. Graham stood alone on the rooftop at dawn, staring out over the Atlanta skyline. In one hand, he held a tablet, its screen glowing faintly with network activity. The decoy blueprint Zoe had helped him plant inside Glasstech servers was now doing its job, quietly pinging back traces, opening doors. They had caught a thief, but not the puppeteer. Inside the building, the command team was back in motion. Leon stood over a table littered with maps and printouts. Stroud was on a second secure line communicating with cyber intel teams in Europe. And Zoe, her hoodie pulled tight over her head, sat behind a laptop monitoring a custom trace interface she'd designed herself. She called it Butterfly Sting. When Graham returned to the control room, Zoe looked up. "We got a hit." Leon leaned over. "We're Midtown Manhattan," she said. "A private investment firm. Name's Bexler Capital." Stroud frowned. They don't develop tech. They move money. Exactly, Zoe said. They're not building anything. They're hiding it. Graham's jaw tensed. Monarch. Leon nodded. They've been laundering tech theft through investment fronts, buying shares in startups, absorbing patents, then burying the real source code. We're not just fighting one thief, Graham said. We're fighting a system. That night, Graham flew to New York alone. No entourage, no PR team, just a black coat and a sealed folder tucked under his arm. He walked into Bexler Capital the next morning like he owned the place. The receptionist stammered when she saw him. His face was too familiar, his name too powerful. I have an appointment, he said, though he didn't. They let him up anyway. Floor 47, private access. The penthouse boardroom was cold and sleek glass walls, mahogany table silence, humming like static. And then movement. A man stepped forward from the shadows. Gray-haired, sharp-suited, calm. The same man Graham had seen in the Glasstec handoff logs. The same voice on the encrypted call intercepted through Camilla's final ping. He didn't offer a name. He didn't need to. You must be Monarch, Graham said. I prefer not to be called anything, the man replied, voice low and precise. But if you insist. Graham dropped the folder on the table. Inside, Data Trace's confession logs, Zoe's signal mapping. I know everything Graham said. The man didn't even glance at the folder. I warned you, he said calmly. You could have walked away. You still can. You went after my company. I went after opportunity. You sent people into my home. I sent tools. You fell for them. You tried to destroy a child's future. The man's voice flattened. She was never the target. She was the mistake. Graham stepped forward, voice sharp. She was the moment you lost. There was silence. The man's gaze narrowed slightly. You think this ends with a file and a conversation? Graham smiled cold. No. It ends with a spotlight. He stepped back and tapped a small device on his wrist. In real time, across 6 major news outlets, the entire Monarch infrastructure was being leaked, backed by encrypted evidence, chain of custody files, and whistleblower testimony from Camilla herself. The man's calm cracked. You'll be buried. Maybe, Graham said. But I'll be buried as the man who stopped you. When he left the building, he didn't look back. That night in Halcyon HQ, the lights stayed on past midnight. The servers pulsed with new life. Security protocols doubled. Internal audits swept through departments like a digital storm. Zoe stood in the executive lounge staring out the tall window. Graham approached quietly. You okay? He asked. She nodded. I just can't believe people can be that bad. They're not all bad, he said softly. Some are just lost. She turned. What about Camilla? Graham paused. She called me last night. Zoe's eyes widened. She said she didn't know they'd go after you. Or after you. Do you believe her? I believe she believed herself. Zoe didn't respond. Graham crouched to her level. You once told me Payne should pay rent, he said. Zoe blinked. Well, Camilla paid, he added. And Monarch's about to get the eviction notice. That night, he tucked her into bed for the first time in weeks. She was quiet but peaceful, like a storm had passed and the ground had stopped shaking. He sat at his desk afterward, voice recorder in hand. This is Graham Ashford, he said. And tonight, I want to remember this moment. Not because it's over, but because we're still here. He looked at a sketch Zoe had pinned above the monitor, a butterfly with a flame behind it. I once thought legacy was about what you leave behind. But maybe it's about who stays with you when everything else burns. The next morning, news broke across every major outlet. Halcyon CEO exposes corporate espionage ring. Inside the whistleblower, files that shook Silicon Valley. Child tech prodigy helped uncover massive tech fraud. They didn't name Zoe. Graham made sure of that. But the world now knew someone had been watching. And someone had whispered the truth when no one else dared to. That evening, as the sun set gold over the Atlanta treetops, Zoe sat beside Graham on the back porch. She looked older now, not in years, but in eyes. He passed her a mug of cocoa. "You still drawing?" She nodded. "Want to see?" She flipped the sketch pad. It was a new design, a sleek W with butterfly wings and a book in the center. "I call it the Maya Initiative," she said. Graham blinked. Maya, she shrugged. It means illusion in some languages, like how people thought everything was fine, but it wasn't. And it was Mom's middle name. He swallowed hard. "I like it. I want it to help kids like me," she said. "Ones who lose everything but still have something to give." He looked at her, really looked. "You design it," he said. "I'll fund the first $1,000,000. Zoe didn't cry. She didn't gasp. She just nodded. Like someone who had already made peace with the mission. Like someone who understood legacy. 3 weeks later, the dust had settled, but the echo still lingered. Halcyon hadn't fallen. It had risen stronger, leaner, guarded. Federal investigations had dismantled most of Monarch's known network. Boardrooms across the country were whispering the same name, Ashford. And not with fear, with respect. But inside Halcyon's headquarters, Graham wasn't focused on reputation. He was focused on foundation. The morning began quietly. A clear sky above Atlanta windows opened to fresh spring air. Maya, Zoe's full name now preferred, was in the sunroom surrounded by Sketch's cocoa and a laptop twice the size of her lap. She'd stopped asking if she belonged in meetings. Everyone simply expected her to be there now. Across the hall, Graham stood in front of the board. Not the board of directors, the real board. A tall cork panel now covered in Polaroids, printed emails, sketches, and a hand-drawn blueprint of the Maya Initiative. Leon stood beside him, arms crossed. Stroud flanked the other side. This was never about money, Graham said, addressing the room. It was about control. They wanted to own what we hadn't even finished dreaming. He paused, then turned to the glass wall overlooking the city. They failed because they underestimated something simple. He turned back. Family. There were no objections. Later that afternoon, Maya joined Graham in the hallway, helping him rearrange the photo wall. She held a framed picture of her parents taken years ago at Lake Lanier. Her mother's curls glowed like wildfire in the sun. Her father had a hand on her shoulder, pride beaming in his grin. Graham paused, eyes softening. That was a good day. Maya nodded quieter than usual. They said I swam like a fish, but I hated the lake water. He chuckled gently. Together they hung the photo in the center, surrounded by older images, black and white shots of Graham's parents, uncles, a few faded newspaper clippings from the company's early days. After a moment, Maya spoke. Why do people do bad things, she asked. Even when they already have everything, Graham lowered himself to the floor beside her, leaning back against the wall. Because having everything outside, he said, doesn't mean they feel full inside. So they keep taking, thinking, maybe the next thing will fix the emptiness. Maya was quiet. Her fingers traced the edge of the wooden frame. I don't ever want to be like that, she whispered. You won't, Graham said. Because you already know the difference. That night, a fire crackled softly in the lounge. The emergency board meeting had ended an hour earlier, with full approval for the Maya initiative, a new branch of Halcyon Educational Outreach Scholarships protection for orphaned youth with tech potential. Fully funded, fully independent, and fully inspired by a 9-year-old girl who once whispered a warning in the dark. Maya sat curled on the couch beside Graham, a bowl of popcorn in her lap. You know, she said I never wanted to say anything about the camera. I thought maybe I'd get in trouble. Graham turned to her. Why? Because you were happy. With Camilla. You smiled, laughed. I didn't want to break that. He didn't speak right away. His throat tightened. You were protecting me, he finally said. Maya nodded. But you were supposed to be the one protecting me? Those words landed deep. He turned and pulled her gently into his arms. You shouldn't have had to choose, he whispered. But I'm grateful you did. She rested her head on his shoulder, voice muffled. You believe me now, right? About everything I always did, he said, even when I didn't show it. They sat like that as the firelight danced across the wall's quiet, calm hole. The following morning, Graham stood outside Halcyon's new vault. Triple-layered encryption, facial scan, pulse check, and a new final key, a biometric bracelet assigned to Maya. She walked beside him now, wearing a fitted blazer over her hoodie, her backpack slung over one shoulder. Inside were sketches for the Maya Initiative's digital launch and a book of quotes from her mother. You're sure about this? He asked. Maya nodded. He smiled. Then let's start. She placed her hand on the final panel. The door clicked open. Inside was a long, narrow room, one server humming. No clutter, no distractions. Just one thing, a screen waiting for input. Maya approached, typed in the first command. A new system interface bloomed across the screen. Simple, clean, secure. Her design, her name, her future. 2 weeks later, in a modest cafe in Brooklyn, Graham sat across from a retired Navy vet named Henkelways. Jazz played in the background, a quiet trumpet weaving through warm afternoon sunlight. He sipped black coffee. Across the table, Maya grinned, spinning a pen between her fingers. You're late, she teased. I'm dramatic, he replied. Big difference. She pushed forward a sketch pad. On the page was a stylized W with butterfly wings wrapped around a glowing orb. New logo, she said. Version 2.0. He stared at it, blinking away something behind his eyes. You're dangerous, he murmured. I'm specific, she corrected. Back at Halcyon, Leon was waiting. His face was more serious than usual. There's something else, he said when Graham returned. We ran the deep trace. On Monarch, Leon nodded. The top layer was gone. But beneath it, we found something worse. Graham's expression didn't change. Leon handed over a folder. 2 of your board members, Claymore and Elliot. Graham flipped it open. Wire transfers, meeting records, offshore contracts. They weren't just passive, they were active collaborators. Graham sat in silence, then looked up. How soon can you get me the room? 15 minutes. At 3:14 p.m., Graham entered the boardroom. Every eye turned. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't throw papers. He just said, "You've confused my kindness for weakness." That ends today. 1 week later, Claymore and Elliot had resigned. 2 new board members were sworn in young sharp and vetted by Leon himself. The Maya Initiative launched that same day. A soft, unassuming headline broke the story. From silence to signal, the whisper that changed everything. They didn't use Maya's full name. They didn't show her face. But the world began to feel her ripple. And at home in the estate where it all began, she sat on the porch beside Graham as fireflies blinked into the night. Do you still think someone's watching? He asked. She looked up at the sky. No, not anymore. He smiled. And if they are, he asked. She smiled back. Let them learn something.